I've had other fish to fry this past week, and so this little slideshow is a bit hurried and a bit rough around the edges, but I think it says everything I need to say. And it's it's about what we call orbs, and I'm sure that most of us here have had experiences of one kind or another in seeing these strange anomalies show up in our photographs and other people's photographs. So let me see if I can properly share my screen here. How's that? Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can do
Okay.
that. Just before we start, can we get everybody to mute themselves just to avoid odd sounds in the background?
So, until the early 1990s, if someone said the word orb, it would probably conjure up an image of a regal sovereign's orb, or perhaps anything spherical, like the Earth or the Moon. But then the digital revolution came to the world of amateur photography with the first compact digital point-and-shoot cameras. They were costly at first, but memory cards were reusable, and you didn't have to wait for your film to be developed and printed at a photo lab or the local drugstore. These early digital cameras soon evolved into today's ubiquitous smartphone cameras. Concurrent with the appearance of these digital cameras was the appearance of a new class of orb, strange visual artifacts. Can you see my cursor pointer here? Is that visible?
Yes, it is, Dan.
Good. Okay. So I'm just pointing out where an example of an orb seen in a flash photograph. Okay. Um, so these are strange visual artifacts often seen in photos and videos illuminated by built-in flash or video light. Here's some typical examples. Now, cameras with flash units had been around for the better part of a century, but as far as we know, no such orbs had ever shown up in these older film cameras. Was digital photography somehow able to capture things that wouldn't register on film and were invisible to the human eye? Well, it wasn't so much digital versus film as that the smaller the camera's sensor and lens, the more it remains in focus, quite close to the lens, even when focused on more distant objects. And unlike traditional cameras, whose flash unit aims at distant subjects, compact cameras' flash units can intensely light up the area immediately in front of the lens. In a sense, these cameras can become illuminated microscopes that can pretty much focus on the tiniest dust particles and moisture droplets that are too small to be seen by the naked eye as they float in the air. Here's a good example in a flash photo taken in the dusty environment of my local municipal garbage dump. Here's one taken on a rainy night. Excuse me, I need to shut something off here. Here's one taken on a rainy night. On seeing their first orbs, some folks leapt to the conclusion that their cameras could be picking up images of spirits. Others conceded that they may not be images of spirits, but that perhaps non-physical entities were at least creating these images. Now, I believe that may sometimes be the case, but physical entities also create their share of orbs. Now, looking at two-dimensional pictures, we can easily make assumptions based on the size, scale, position, and apparent distance of objects and other visual cues, but those can be deceiving. For example, this is what's called an Ames room. Its left corner is actually much taller and farther away than its right, but it's constructed to create this illusion when seen from this particular perspective. Here's another good example of subjective size, taken by a digital doorbell camera late one night. Here we see what is most likely a very tiny out-of-focus insect crawling on the lens. You can see it proceeding haltingly and periodically changing its direction. On seeing this video, the owner insisted that the orb must be basketball-sized and was moving through the tree. But there appears to be nothing at all on which to base that assumption. In fact, these orb-like artifacts are never seen peeking out from behind other objects. So despite the illusion of distance, all the evidence suggests that they're in the foreground, most likely within inches of the lens. In this photo, many of these orbs appear to be behind the fence. But when you look closely, you can see where the fence is slightly brightened by the orbs that are actually in front of it. Very slight brightening here, you can see, as well as here. One way to confirm the actual distance of orbs would be to use a stereoscopic camera, which takes two simultaneous pictures through the lenses a few inches apart. You could also do this with two ordinary cameras side by side. If this camera were to photograph orbs, my guess is that the two images would be radically different from each other. Another source of orbs are what are known as lens flares. In this photo, we see some typical flares from the setting sun. Camera lenses are actually a series of lenses stacked together. So when a camera is aimed at or near a strong light source like the sun, light can bounce around inside these lenses and create multiple images of the source. Here's a closer look. In addition to the flares, we can also see these hexagonal forms, and these are caused by the camera's six-sided diaphragm or lens. Here's a common type of sun flare which showed up in my iPhone camera. Here's a different sort of misidentification in which a flying insect caught in the camera flash was interpreted by the photographer as a tiny angel. So, back to orbs. If misidentification were the whole story of orbs, it would end here. But it's not the whole story. Keep in mind that instrumental transcommunication does confirm that disembodied consciousness can, in fact, interact with our electronic technologies. So let's take a look at the other side of the story. Here's a personal example. A friend in Seattle was a building contractor who remodeled old houses and often took reference photos in dusty environments. He'd never once seen orbs in his flash photos. But after I mentioned them to him and his family, they began to show up in his photos. Here's a photo of one of his children. You can see this orb showed up right here. Here's one he took in an insulated attic. And again, he'd never seen these before, even in such a dusty environment. And here's an anomalous orb in a Christmas tree. And some outstanding ones he took at a children's choir performance in a church. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that I can see in this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at least. Here's a shot I took some years ago at the Institute of Noetic Sciences during a break in a presentation. It was taken with a digital still camera I'd used for over a month, indoors and out, with no orbs appearing. But then in this particular situation, these peculiarly structured forms appeared. One of which, this one, resembled an alien-like head looking in the direction of the presentation. One interesting feature of truly anomalous orbs is that they often appear in the same form as explainable orbs. So, could non-physical entities be manifesting tiny specks of matter, the size of dust particles, in order to be seen by small digital flash cameras? If so, that might help the skeptics and the believers find some common ground. Here's one for the Buddhists. Check this one out. This orb just squarely positioned on this Buddhist artifact. Sorry. And if you want to see some really spectacular paranormal orbs, check out this 2007 book, The Orb Project, by Klaus Heinemann and Michael Ledwith. In my opinion, the book makes a religion out of orbs, and I would argue with its presuppositions and technical explanations. But it does offer compelling evidence that, whatever the mechanism of their appearance, many of them cannot be explained in conventional terms. Here are a few illustrations from the book. I love this one. And while we're at it, here's another interesting phenomenon that some people have reported in their photos in connection with orbs. Thick mists that appear almost sculpted, very unlike natural smoke or fog, which tend to be more evenly dispersed in the air. You can see a small orb here in this photo. Okay, now, as a pièce de résistance, here are daylight images of an apparently glowing entity on the grounds of a spiritist center in Brazil, taken by a French visitor, Denis Damour, in 2007. This little character is clearly not reflecting the camera's flash and is photographed in full daylight. It seems like some sort of energy being with a sort of spine, head, and multiple appendages, and it appears to be constantly changing its shape. I have no idea what it is, but it's no dust particle. I assume it was visible to the photographer. And I confess that this one blows my mind. This one too. I cannot explain any of these on any technical grounds. So that's my brief slideshow for today. I do have for dessert a couple of my favorite photographic illusions that I'd like to throw in here. This is the Eshima Ohashi Bridge in Japan. It's called one of the world's scariest bridges, here revealed in stomach-churning photos. And as you can see, this bridge looks truly terrifying. But is that what it really looks like? Well, this is what it looks like when photographed from a certain angle with a telephoto lens. And this is what it actually looks like, as seen on Google Street View. So when we see these things online, I think we need to be at least a little bit skeptical. Now, here's another favorite of mine. It's I think some of you may have seen this a few years ago. It was a family photo taken in, excuse me, I want to move this over, taken in Kukulkan in Mexico. And so we see here this pyramid shooting a beam of light up into the sky. This photo made a lot of waves when it was first revealed. It was probably about 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And it was on a special TV show in Mexico and so on. But in reality, what this is an example of what's called a rolling shutter. Digital cameras don't expose the whole image at once. They expose it sort of in a slit that moves, in this case, right to left. Or if the camera's turned the other way, it goes up to down. And as that exposure reached the center of the picture, a lightning flash went off as actually in the clouds behind the pyramid. And that's why this band is exposed more brightly. And we don't see it in the foreground because it took place behind the pyramid. So that's the scoop on this one. But it's a lovely photograph. And here's another example of the same effect, where when the exposure reached this part of the photo, you can actually see the lightning strike here. So this is almost like a beam down from the heavens. Anyway, and with that, I'll close for today. Thank you for watching and listening. And so we're back to reality here.
Thank you, Dan. That was great.
Yeah, it could have been twice as long, but I tried to keep it short and didn't have time for a whole lot more this week. But anyway, I hope this explains my stance on this, which is really in the middle. And I think it means that we have to be careful when we prejudge anything as either explainable or unexplainable. Well, you really have to dig into it, be familiar with the technology, if that's in question, the circumstances, the people, and so on. And as most of you are aware, I sort of sit at the uncomfortable interface between science and spirituality. And I guess my stance is that it's all part of the big picture, and that we need to be cautious about taking any one particular stance. To me, science is basically organized curiosity, and I think when it violates that spirit, it gets in trouble, and it gets us in trouble. So, and same with spirituality. It may be in its more extreme forms, it may be a little too organized, but we all have our own ways of making sense out of all of this. And I think the more we share with each other how and why we make our own sense of all this, the more we will grow and expand and learn, and also be kinder to each other. So, any questions? Sally?
Thank you. First, thank you for that really lovely presentation. And I am with you on this topic because I have seen so many images that people without any background in photography sort of make leaps to say, oh, it's an angel, it's a fairy, it's a, it's a real orb, when it may well be dust, because the cameras that most of these are taken on now, more often than not, are cell phones with flash, and they don't occur without the flash, typically speaking.
Right.
And so I have always been kind of half believer, half skeptic as well, because there have been things that I have seen that have been truly anomalous. For example, I'm going to bring you in on this, Gary. For a good long while, Gary was getting lots of orbs in Zoom rooms, and they seemed to act with intelligence. They would pop up at very specific times, either when he was talking about a loved one or happened to say something really profound that would also give me chills. And then an orb would pop in, And so if they were just happening randomly, I would say, who knows what it could be, right? But the fact was that they seemed to act with intelligence. And I think that that might be a really important factor when we're looking at these things. But I see a lot of things that are truly related to the lens. I think a lot of things that I see these days that people share and think that there's some amazing, sacred geometry or something, or these kind of lens flares that have this kind of almost funnel type structure to them. And that can be explained by the lens and the light source, which is typically the sun.
Right. And when the sun is just outside the frame and it's not visible, usually if you look at the angle of the rays and you trace them in that direction, they will point directly at the sun.
Right. Yeah.
By the way, one thing that I did neglect to mention in this presentation is that on rare occasion, people claim they can see orbs in their surroundings. And that is obviously a completely different sort of phenomenon. Gary?
Yeah, I've noticed when I was having a lot of orb activity, and I don't doubt it's still going on, but I have a white background most of the time now, so you don't notice them. But I would see them peripherally. So in other words, I'd see them coming, they'd disappear, but they'd show up on Zoom, and then I would see them leaving peripherally.
Do you have any recordings of that?
There are some, I believe. There are some.
I have them. I made a short video.
Dan,
I'd love to see it. Please,
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
Dan, I got to ask you about this one. I don't know if this will show up well, but my neighbor, the night of the blood moon, took this picture of my burnout house. Now, she saw this with the naked eye, which prompted her to take the picture. But do you see the beam coming down from the blood moon?
Yes. That can be a sort of common aberration when the lens is obviously the camera was trying to expose for the generally darker scene. No,
she was seeing it with her naked eye.
Oh, okay. Then forget everything I said.
Yeah, that's what prompted her to take the photograph.
Wow. And so, can you show it me? Can you hold it up again?
Sure.
Well, and I'd also like to point out real quickly while he's showing that sometimes the most important thing is the meaning that we take from something. So even if it has very earthy, logical explanations for why it occurs, if somebody can make a synchronistic connection that's meaningful to them, then I'm like, well, what does it matter? Right? Because I'm kind of believe in everyday oracles, right? I look around me at the world to see what messages it has for me. And so sometimes I'm very forgiving of people that say, oh, look at this. I really think it was my son. I thought of my son when I saw this, or I thought of my husband or whatever. If that gives them meaning and comfort, I'm not about to be the one that says, that might be dust, or, oh, that's a lens flare.
Right.
But I don't
absolutely.
but then I don't necessarily want that to be held up as evidence of, some other phenomena that's, that can't be explained. Right. I think we have to be very careful in our work that if we say this is supernatural, that's not my favorite word, but supernatural in nature, that it's got strong evidence that it is. Right.
Yeah, I agree absolutely, Sally. I very often have my most frequent type of synchronicity is I'll be listening to radio and typing something, and as I type a word, I'll hear it on the radio. Last year, I was in my favorite local cafe, and I was writing and just searching for a certain word. I knew what it was, but I couldn't quite nail it. And the people at the next table said that word at that moment. And it's that kind of thing. And I don't know that I make particular meanings of that, but it does give me a sense of things being interconnected.
Right.
Right. And it's hard to know whether we're always interconnected and not noticing it, or whether it's just these events that tend to underline it for us, to spotlight it for
Get our
us.
attention,
Yeah.
right? Get our
Right.
attention, because I would claim we all are always interconnected.
Of course.
But
Gary,
just
can you just speak for a moment while you show show that image again?
Sure. Now,
'Cause-
I did not see it myself, but she said, I saw this image like a beam shining down, and that in the background is my burnt out house.
right, wow.
And so she said, I took pictures of it. Now, she took that picture, that was natural lighting, but she took another one where she tried to lighten it, and it's still there. You can see it
Hmm.
where
Well, what can I say? If she says she saw it with the naked eye, then
she
that's what
wouldn't have been taking pictures of my burnout house. Otherwise, it's not that appealing, which is now gone, by the way. It got torn down.
Oh, what's the prognosis now, time-wise?
I'm hoping by July sometime being in my house. So we'll see.
Wonderful. May it be so. May it be
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And Sally, I apologize for interrupting you there.
No,
You
no,
had
that's
something
okay.
else.
I just one more thing, because it's an example of when it can truly be phenomena. So one example that I have is I have been in the room with a physical medium whose phone was picking up orbs like crazy, left and right.
Mhm.
Everybody else, and some of who had the identical same phone, same model and everything, were in the same place at the same time, also filming. They would get a few here and there, but it wouldn't be the mass of orbs that the physical medium was getting in her phone. So that to me is phenomena, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because they could be in the same location as she was. They could be all the conditions were the same. They'd get an orb here, an orb there. She would turn on her phone, and because of the mediumship that was involved, it would be full of orbs. And so that's a difference.
That makes sense to me, but with one caveat. Here's my phone. The so-called orb zone, where explainable orbs turn up, is about here.
Right.
It's very close to the lens, in spite of the illusion of them being out there in the distance. So in that type of situation, it is at least theoretically possible that the air in front of her camera was dustier than in front of the other cameras. I'm not saying that was the case, but it's just this type of thing that we need to be aware of.
Right. No, I agree with you. And being in the same room or even standing right next to each other, putting the phones immediately next to each other,
Right.
hers would still be full of orbs and the other one would have one or two here and there. And you can see if it's dust, if you're in a darkened room with a flash on, you can see the dust right in front of the camera, if that's what's creating the orb. Because that being that close, the dust shows up and you can see it with the naked eye.
Right.
So there are little things you can do.
What we're actually seeing in this larger circular orbs is not a sharply focused image of the dust particle. It's what's called a diffraction disk. It's slightly out of focus, which makes it bloom larger. If it weren't, you'd just see a very tiny point of light and might not even notice it. So anyway, yes, we're this whole question is sits right on the edge of semantics, physics versus metaphysics, individual perception, mediumship ability, and things that go bump in the night. So,
Can I don't
gee,
know where my hand thing is on my computer, so I use the real thing.
okay.
Do you have the picture I gave to you Friday night, Dan, accessible, or should I pull it up on my phone?
Which one was that, Jean, please?
The orb that was on my daughter's shoulder.
Oh, I didn't see that one, so please show it if you can.
Well, when you talk, Sally, about the intention behind it, or Gary about the intelligence of the orb,
Right.
whether they're using the physical environment or not. When my daughter was going to get married, we were having a party, a bridal shower for her at a local restaurant, and she used it as a practice session with the hair person and makeup person who were friends of ours, very metaphysical, and doing her makeup and her hair before the event, and also practicing in a couple of us. We were in my friend's apartment, and the apartment is pretty dark, but there was one window, but the
Oh, yes, I remember now. I remember now. Yes,
the
yes,
sun
yes.
was going east to west, and the window was north, so it did not have direct sunlight in it. And my daughter Kylene had passed in 2011. She'd been there for my first daughter's wedding, but she was not there for her other sister's wedding. But she was very, very prominent. And all of a sudden, I was taking pictures of Julia because she was in various stages of being, prettied up. And all of a sudden, this huge, huge light appeared, orb on her shoulder. And I went around showing everybody this picture, and other people tried to capture it and they didn't get it. But we all knew because we could feel it, because Julia had this intense response to knowing that was Kylene, being right with her. So whatever mechanism is explained or isn't explained, I know because the intention was from Kylene to make her presence known, to say, I'm still here with you. I'm enjoying all this, the ceremony and all of the celebration, because it was stunning. It was one of the most stunning pictures I've ever seen. And I can get it up on my phone if you don't have it. I gave it to you, Dan. I just don't.
I did get it, and I'm sorry I don't know at this moment where I filed it. But if you can just hold up if you have it on your phone and hold it up.
Yeah, let me get it. You guys talk amongst yourselves.
As I recall, it was not a flash photo. Is that correct?
It was on my phone.
On your phone. Okay. Because
Yeah.
my first question was, could that have been a reflection from the window of the flash?
I don't think I had my flash on.
Okay. Yeah, because my first impression was it didn't look like a flash photo.
No, it wasn't. Because it wasn't that dark. It took me a while to find it last night, and I'll have to go through this again. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just find you on my.
While you're looking for that, Dan, may I share something?
Please.
Because she's bugging me. Tell them about that. One time I was on having a Zoom conversation with Karen Jarvie. This is probably 4 or 5 years ago. And she said, you have an orb. And sure enough, it would come through, it would linger behind me, and she would go to pick up her camera and it would zoom away. And it actually played with us.
Wow.
Until finally did capture a picture of it.
Wow.
And she got a very clear picture of it, but it was exhibiting intelligence. And then Christine Brooks wrote in the chat that I've seen orbs with Gary. The appearance and movement clearly is definable from dust particles and very cool. So, I can't explain it, but they don't show up because I have a white background now. But when my house was standing, I had a little darker background, so the orbs could show up.
You need to tell them about Tinkerbell. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I saw one do something I've never seen before or since. And Susie Bennett, who is here, was on Zoom with me. It was the beginning of the book club, and we were the only two online. But an orb came and it hovered right here and grew brighter and burst into sparks like Tinkerbell's.
Wow.
And disappeared. And how do you explain that? You just got to go, well, that was something.
I don't know how well you can see this, but this is my daughter and the gal that was doing her hair. And then this is the light that showed up around her.
If you can maybe tilt the camera forward a little bit to make it a little dimmer. No, move it away from your camera, but tilt it so it's not so bright. Tilt it. Yeah, more so. That may, more, even more so.
What's the white box, Jeannie, below the?
Oh, hold on. I don't know.
If you can hold that the other way, horizontally maybe, so the whole photo shows.
Yeah, I know. It clicked something up. I apologize.
That's better.
God
That's
bless
gone.
America. See if I get my fingers out of the way.
That's better.
But it's just that
Yeah.
bright.
Yeah. It's that white area is being exaggerated by the webcam. But yes, I think it is a remarkable photo, and you've never gotten anything like that at other times, have you?
No, this was a one up. I mean, I've had other phenomena like last night in the middle of the night, Spirit was here because when I got to use the bathroom, they decided to dim the lights slowly, flicker them a little bit, and then up they went. And I said, oh, okay, who's here? And then I finished and I came back in and they went down again and flickered a little bit. And then nothing is wrong with them because they use my lights every once in a while when they want me to pay attention. I still don't know who it was, but I have so many that want to say hello that it could be anyone. Wasn't anything impending or, that I picked up, but yeah.
I have a video that was sent to me by Bob, what's his name? Forever Family Foundation. After his daughter passed, he and his wife were in their kitchen one night, and there was a spectacular display of blinking lights in the kitchen. And if I can find that video, I might be able to bring it up right during our session today. Let me take a look. It's really fun. But yeah, I personally experienced the lights going on and off and so on. I think it's probably one of the easiest things for them to do.
Dan, Steve
Yes.
has a little video to show, an orb video.
You have?
Steve Pryor.
Oh, Steve.
Dave Fry has it.
Oh, please.
I have a link. It's on YouTube. It's just it's only about less than a minute.
Well,
But
go
what
ahead
I
and
did-
share it.
I'll give you a little background while we're waiting for that. This is a video capture using an iPhone 5C in 2016. Somebody's captured this over in Oakland, and they sent it to me because they didn't understand how this happened. Because the orb is coming, there's no lights behind, so there's no possible reflections. So it comes right out of like the ceiling and right past the camera. All right, here it is. So let me make it full screen. Here we go. Starts in slow motion. So I don't know how you explain that. It's in a still room. There's nothing happening there. You just I don't know why she had her phone on, but the video, but that's how it worked.
If that was the only orb that showed up, it's
She said it was. She thought it was her husband who had recently died.
could be if there's only a single orb and nothing else. That would be unusual in any kind of dusty environment.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell. And the thing is that when orbs are created by dust, they're responding to the tiniest air currents, which we can't even feel. So these are, when it happens, it's a microscopic phenomenon. So, and that's what makes the question very hard to answer often.
This one, you could see it started off smaller, became bigger as it came to the camera. So I don't know. It didn't seem like dust to me.
Well, we don't know. We just don't know. But sometimes the coincidental circumstances will give us a clue. So it's entirely possible that this could have been a communication from her deceased husband. It's so hard. It's so hard to make a definitive judgment at a distance.
I had a friend who went to visit John of God down in South America, and she brought back a lot of orb pictures taken at night. So
right, I'm sure that in that environment, it would have been a slam dunk for them to create orbs for us.
Anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Joyce?
I wanted to just share both. Thank you for doing both ends of the spectrum with this, because I have seen people use and abuse the exclamation that this was an orb and come to see me. And it was really a sad use of what can be a communication from spirit. So my example that was pretty amazing was my sister, who had taken many pictures with her brand new digital camera several years ago, 20 years ago now. Never had any orbs. She doesn't believe in any of that. In fact, her religion is pretty anti-orb or anti most paranormal phenomena. But she was pregnant, and she was in her 7th month, I believe, and she had spotting and was really concerned that she was going to lose the baby. And she was having a gathering with people, and they happened to take a photograph of her. And there was a gigantic orb right on her belly. And she told me that she didn't have any idea that this was captured in film, but she felt in the moment that the photo was taken that she was being surrounded by spirit, so that the baby would be okay, that the pregnancy would be fine, and that she would have it and it would be healthy and she would be healthy. And when she went to look at the photograph and saw this, she was stunned and couldn't help but be swayed to say, there's something to this, because I felt it. And she sent it to me. This was years ago, 20 years ago. Anyway, it was pretty phenomenal. The other thing I want to mention about this is that when there's a pattern of using a camera in the same way, in the same rooms, with the similar light across, from morning till night over summers and everything, and the pattern is no orbs at all, and then for an orb to appear suddenly in that particular context, speaking to Sally's mention of intention, was amazing for me to witness. Anyway, thanks for letting me share that.
Oh, thank you, Joyce. Ellen?
Yeah, it's almost like Joyce set this up. There's a video that Nancy Fryer has that she actually published in the Inner Voice, and it was a security camera video of orbs. And so I chatted with her momentarily, and she said she found the video, so she can explain this better than I can, but it is fascinating, and I was hoping that it would be okay for her to share that.
Sure.
I'd be happy to. Thanks for asking. I guess I need to screen share.
I think you can. I think we've given everyone permission to share, so just try it. Try sharing screen.
A little background. It happened about a year ago. My cousin John has this garage where he keeps his Corvette and does his music and tinkers with many things. And he had a security camera in this garage for the above reasons. And it caught this orb or whatever on camera, and he could not figure it out. And he had me come in person to deal with the spirit. And via video, Susan Barnes was called in on it, and we cleared his garage. But here's the video. If I can figure out how to share it, if I do that.
The share button should be at the bottom of your Zoom window.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then you can click on which of your computer windows you want to share.
Okay. Here goes. It's about 5 minutes. I should say my cousin John edited the camera and added the text.
Nancy, if you mentioned those are batteries, that if you could talk about what's in that garage, it's kind of cool.
The shelving unit beyond the car are batteries stored. And it seemed like the orb hung around there, maybe to pick up energy. I don't know. You see a reflection on the floor below of the orb?
Yeah.
And the garage door is to the right, which is closed. And so the orb comes to the door and then comes at you around the back of the car.
Does the camera itself follow motion? Is it a motion follow? Or just
I believe so. I'm not positive though, but
most of these security cameras will start recording when they sense motion. So I would say that in this case, if there was no one present,
no one's present.
if this was not a reflection of some oscillating mirror or light or something like that, which it does not appear to be, I think it's quite extraordinary.
Watch it from the front of the garage or the back of the garage. And then there's
went through the door right there.
There's like 27 clips, but he edited it down into 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a static camera.
Yeah, and I would love to have a copy of this to be able to study it carefully because it's quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, when I went there that day, this was last September, I cleared the space and he's never had this phenomena there again.
Huh.
Why did you do that?
Why? Well,
did you find out what it was?
I felt it was a spirit that didn't belong there, that was just maybe either playing with him or having fun. I mean, it's very odd, but I felt it was lost and having fun, but was definitely didn't belong there.
It loved the car. It loved the car.
If you notice to the back of the garage, you can see a faint orb moving before it comes toward the car.
Isn't that near an Indian burial ground or something?
I believe so. This is west of the town I live in, Neenah, Wisconsin, which is all Indian land at one point.
Right.
And I had another phenomenon like this happen, nothing on camera, but in the same area, there's a mall built over what was farmland. And I knew the owner of the store in this mall that was haunted. she called me to have me come and clear the spirit that was haunting the store. And she would see
One
people
thing,
walk in the store and nobody would be in the store. Stuff like that.
now, excuse me, Nancy, one thing I'm noticing is that what appears to be a reflection off the floor and so on
Yeah.
is actually an internal lens reflection.
Oh,
So it's so that what we're seeing, whether it's out there in real space or not, I can't determine at the moment. But see, if it were out there in real space, it could be inches from the lens, or it could be at a distance. If it were beyond the car, we'd see it reflected in the shiny surface of the car.
could be a firefly, but it's too big.
No, and it's also too it's too smooth and even. And that could just be a matter of what's called blooming, that when something is overexposed, it tends to take a more round shape. But anyway, this is why I would love to have a copy of this so that I can take a closer look at it. But it seems to me quite extraordinary.
Isn't it? I see it at the back of the garage right now.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know if it's actually in the back of the garage or whether it's an inch from the lens and a very tiny point of light. And that's one of the things that I'd like to study. When it goes to the back of the garage, if it were in real space, we would see it reflected off the floor. And we don't see that. So this is one of the things that in evaluating these things, and this is, whether it's partly determines whether it's physical or metaphysical, is whether we see reflections of it in reflective surfaces.
Mm.
And there's so many variables.
Suddenly it stopped.
Okay.
And this went on in the middle of the night when he wasn't there and he had the camera on.
Right.
And I think he said there were 27 events of the
Wow.
orb shooting, and then it suddenly came to a stop. And I went there the next day and did my work in releasing that video. Maybe Susan remembers some of that we did. She was there via video. She wants to add anything.
Susan? You're muted.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, I seem to recall, Nancy, that we did sense that it was a spirit. And I do think that, and I do sense it had something to do with that Indian area, that land that was there. And what we did was we spoke to the spirit and we did prayers and we told the spirit that their family was waiting for them on the other side. And so that we encouraged the spirit to move on and join the rest of their family. And it never came back. So, yeah.
And I just spoke to my cousin recently, about 2 weeks ago, and he still has not had any activity there.
Yeah.
So
I was going to tell a different story. I have a friend who is a professional artist who does a lot of photography in his work. And he came to visit me in Lilydale, and I started talking about orbs. And he was like, what are orbs? What are these things? So I said to him, okay, take your camera, go to the ferry trail, and you'll get orbs to photograph. We did, and we got orbs. I mean, there are places in Lilydale where the orbs, we get a lot of orb pictures. I mean, with a lot of different phones or cameras or whatever, and they're just there.
Well, that sounds pretty convincing.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you can almost predict it,
Right.
which is what I did. And he'd never done it. I just said, go there and shoot some pictures. And he shot some pictures and he looked at the pictures later and he said, oh my God, there's orbs in them. Because he didn't believe in orbs and he had no idea what they were.
I
But
have a quick question for you, Susan and Dan. Can we see orbs with a naked eye, or do they only show up on camera?
sometimes you can
Yeah.
see the naked eye.
That's what I've heard. I haven't seen them visually myself, but I know people who claim that they have seen orbs moving around them. And again, orb is a general term. We haven't formally studied them well enough to make enough distinctions. So it's kind of a vague description of an apparently bright spot or presumably object or projection in a photographic or video image. So it's pretty. I don't think it's been studied well enough for us to have more precise language about it.
But I know there are people that they go in. I know Shannon Taggart's photographed them. They've gone and they've called in orbs, and I'm sure some of the people have physically seen those with their orbs because there's like hundreds of them. They just pull them in, and they're everywhere, everywhere.
The thing is that you have to address each particular instance or each particular situation. It's tough. I mean, I wish I had a grant to study this, because that's really what it would take to come to any kind of consistent understanding about this. I mean, we're probably dealing with a dozen different phenomena here.
But also, is there a difference between being outside and inside?
What do you mean?
Like my pictures we take at Lilydale are outside. The pictures
Outdoors and indoors, you mean? Yeah.
outdoors, yeah. Versus in my house in Lilydale, people have captured orbs inside the house.
With or without flash?
I don't remember.
No.
I don't remember.
For starters, I would have to see the actual photographs to even begin to, and then ask questions of the photographer. It's the situation is more complicated than it seems, and it's again what we're doing today is just kind of taking a rough scattershot look at these phenomena, and I say phenomena plural because I'm convinced we're dealing with more than one kind of a phenomenon. And it's a general challenge in these areas where the physical and the metaphysical come together. We hardly have the language for it. We're just beginning to climb this mountain, as it were. But I think it's important that we do, and that various different experiences and points of view be discussed.
We have Hyacinth, and then Kim would like to share a photograph.
Okay, I just want Hyacinth has had her hand up for a while.
Yes, Hyacinth first.
Yes.
Okay. I have a friend. He's a mathematician, and he's been going to crop circles for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would camp out to where they think a circle would be, and sometimes they're successful. And somebody stands guard, because it's happening at night, while they sleep, and then wakes up if there is something that's happening. And what they saw was this masses of orbs flickering all over the place, not a sound, just flickering orbs. And when the sun rose, there was a crop circle 4 football fields big. Thank you.
Thank you, Hyacinth.
That's fabulous.
That's a whole other discussion. And another wonderful, marvelous area of physical metaphysical interface with lots of physical evidence and a lot of people's experiences. I know a friend of mine was a crop circle researcher for a while, went over to the UK, spent time there, and he had one spectacular instance of a time shift. He was with a group taking pictures in a crop circle, and his camera ran out of film, so he had to go back to his car where he kept the film. And so he walks out of the crop circle onto the road, and he can't find his car. He says, "I'm sure I parked it someplace around here." So he goes walking along the road and suddenly finds himself on a dirt road, the outskirts of what he called a 16th century English village. And stood there trying to decide whether he should actually, walk into it, in which case he wasn't sure he could come back. But he just, and unfortunately he didn't, again, his camera was out of film. Interesting moment. And so he turned around and went back and walked along the road, and sure enough, there was his car, and his folks waiting for him and so on. So, this is obviously or I would say presumably an experience that other people would not have witnessed had they been looking in his direction. So it was his consciousness moving into this other time frame. On another occasion, he said to his friend, says, I'm going to move. I want to go climb that hill over there and get a better picture. And they kind of looked at him strangely. And when he went out in that direction, there was no hill. So at least that's as he told me the story. So there again, you have a physical area where there is a window or a field, a field of consciousness or whatever it is that we may or may not have words for it, that demonstrates that something's going on and really can't be denied. Kim, you had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I'll just try and share my screen. So I've shown this previously years ago. We had another orb meeting, I think, and I showed this. This is a photograph of a shaman friend, and we'd been at a big shamanic event, and she'd been in a group with us and been in tears because her dog had just died. Mm-hmm. And as she was going, I took a photo of her in the car. I actually saw the light shoot across the viewfinder. Mm. So I saw this. And when you follow it, you can see, not so much, but if you lighten the photograph, there's an actual trail. You can see it down here as it's come up, right up to her face like that, and that's catching it as it bounced back down and out of the car. So for me, I just knew that was spirit, but it was also caught because I saw it. She's only ever had 2 dogs, and the other one got to me in a dream. So, yeah, she's pretty chuffed that she's got a photograph of it.
Mm. Thanks, Kim. Nancy? Nancy Fryer?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add a comment earlier to what Susan Barnes had said about, going out in Lilydale and taking a photo of the orbs. I think it's also, we get also an intuitive thought from that spirit or that, whatever that is, that's calling to us. In the case of the orb in the garage, I felt it was a spirit. I mean, it was an intuitive thought that came with I didn't see the image, but I could feel it. Mm-hmm. And I guess they don't appear until they're on camera, but I'm trying to explain this, but I think I'm not sure if I'm explaining it correctly, but I think there are different situations, to your point, Dan, and different types of spirits and different types of orbs that we can experience. But I think it also comes with the intuitive thought, perhaps the orb telling us to go take the photo and appear.
Could be. That very well could be. And, it's hard to tell, maybe impossible to tell, whether what we're seeing is a spirit itself projecting itself into our space, or whether the spirit has merely created a light effect to communicate with us.
Yes.
And in a way, it hardly matters because it is a communication one way or the other. Yes. But I think that we need to be careful about projecting our sense of reality onto another system and saying, well, we see something, therefore it must be the being itself. So, and again, the important thing is that it happens at all.
Right.
So, I mean, that to me, at least at this point in our understanding, that's the main thing. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks. Regina.
My turn. As far as seeing orbs, I saw them for 2 to 8, from the time I was 2 till before my 9th birthday. Night before my 9th birthday, literally almost nightly. And I could see him from far away and then all the way into my room, and I could hold him.
Wow.
And then, but they were always communicating, talking to me and telling me what to do. And so I also received so much information, massive amount of information. But as an infant, I didn't have the words, but I had the pictures. And especially when I held them, that's when they really talked to me and showed me about how I could move the ball, their energy, their light, and I'd move it over my body when I was hurting. And when I was 8, I was suffering from ulcers. And so at that point, I'd bring it down and put it over my stomach and things. But
Did it feel to you like a solid object or a soft object or something warm and fuzzy or etheric, or how did it?
you know what? I have no, the actual physical object, I didn't think of anything other than it was a ball of light. That was my whole concept ever since I was little. And the whole thing, I didn't want my brothers or sisters to wake up when it was in my room because I didn't want to share it. And, when you have 7 siblings, you don't want anybody knowing your little special toy because you have to share it all the time. So that was one of the things. And then the other thing is, by the time I was 4 or 5, I could stand up tall enough over my windowsills. Even younger than that, I'd pull myself up and wait for it to come. I didn't care about going to bed. I wanted to wait. I couldn't wait for the being to come. And it didn't have to be dark for me to see it. And they would shoot. Sometimes it's more than one, and they'd come over the horizon. And then by the time they made it into my room, just before, it'd consolidate to one. It was amazing, but it was full of intelligence. And then I was going to show you the picture because remember, I'm going to share this picture. This picture was taken, let's see. Can I share? What's going on here?
Regina, I had almost the exact same experience as a kid, except they were protectors for me.
Ah, who's this talking?
Oh, this is Joyce.
Joyce.
Oh, hi, Joyce. Can you see the picture by any chance?
No, you want to share? Use the share screen button at the bottom of your Zoom window.
Oh, it goes to.
And then you have a choice.
Thing.
Then you have a choice of windows to share.
Now it's giving me unknowns, previews unknowns, applications unknowns. All right, that doesn't matter. Anyway, we have a photograph. Dan saw it the other day, and it was my neighbor who lived on the hill just where those light things would come, and his mother saw him outside. This was shot in the 60s. His mother saw him outside working, and she saw all these orbs floating around. So she ran and got the regular 35 millimeter film camera and took pictures of it. And there's all these light orbs, look like, just floating around, but they were pretty solid looking. They almost look like somebody has turned on balls of light. And those happened to this kid all the time. So were they the same ones? I don't know. And that's the only photograph that seen, but it felt very, very similar to what I had, but except that, I don't know, being solid or not, I know that I could capture it in my hands, but it also was fluid. It was fluid. It like there was no viscosity to it. If I put it too tight, it'd go through my hands because I could push it through my body, and I would push it into my stomach when my stomach was really hurting. And so, and it would tell me what to do. It was amazing. Okay, there's my story.
Wow, thank you, Regina. Sally?
Yeah, I'm gonna just take a tangent for just a second too. The piece of your presentation that had the little video of the dog, is that Sherry Pearl's little dog or is that somebody else?
I can't say.
Okay, but that's okay. I will say that in that video, I saw a face on the wall. In there's a bright spot on the wall. And for me, I can see a face there. Now, pareidoia is a thing, and I can be as susceptible to it as anybody. But when the face is recognizable, that's impressive. I'm not saying I recognize that face, but if somebody does look at it, whoever maybe was doing the video, if they look and see the face, they might recognize them. And I have found faces in images from both photographs and video that had people in it that were recognizable. So that can happen as well. And it's not unusual, I have found, for orbs to show up in the same instances.
Good. I'll recheck that video and see what I see in it. Thanks.
Okay, it's a bright spot on that on the back wall, just the bit with the dog.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks. Okay, I'm
No
going to now
problem.
I'm now going to show this clip that Bob Ginsberg sent me. Okay, can you all see that? This was their kitchen. And sorry. Well, that's interesting. It won't play. Oh, there we go.
Oh, I love it when lights do that.
It's just those two lamps over the sink area.
So like a spiritual Morse code.
Right. I was thinking the same thing, Jeannie.
And one of those bulbs is probably incandescent, and one of them is an LED. So they blink, they brighten and darken at different times, but they're actually simultaneous. But the result looks like a sort of a dance. And this one, they turned on all the other lights in the room. And they had Bob. Let me stop the share. Oh no, actually, there's another. Hold on a sec. No, I'll show the other one later. It's similar. In any case, yeah, they brought an electrician in, checked out all the circuits and the switches and everything just to be absolutely sure. And of course, they found nothing out of order. And in my experience, these things happen, and then nothing will happen for a good long while. There's nothing wrong with the electrical device or anything like that. I was at an event a few years ago in a church here in Marin, which was partly a memorial service for someone who had been involved with a particular organization. And when they got to the memorial service part of the event, the ceiling lights in the church went crazy. And then we concluded that part of the event, the lighting went back to normal. So that was fun. And the deceased individual had been a technical advisor and a media person and knew his way around electricity. So that might have helped, help facilitated the situation. But I think these are I find them amusing and entertaining and encouraging too.
Curious, Dan.
Yeah.
In the Bob Ginsberg video, had they recently lost someone, a child?
Yes. I believe it was his daughter who had passed.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and his wife actually passed a few years subsequent to that, but this was, I believe, his daughter. There is a second video which I'll try to find, but Jean, did you have?
Well, it's the segue to something else, but it touches on base with proving things in a scientific way for whatever reasons people need that versus the intuitive knowing. For those of us who are really empaths, there are times when it's flat and there isn't a sense of anything because maybe it is just some kind of physical dirt on the lens. But then the other times the knowing is so strong, it just can't be denied. And that's what makes us good at our job and what we do. And so, for my end of it, I will take that sense of things more than just, oh, it's dust or this or that. But on that line, many years ago, when I was really developing into all of this, and I was with a gentleman that was the father of my first daughter, and we were just really being guided newly into the gurus and Sai Baba. And my husband partner at the time, Jeff, Christmas night was really praying. I had gone to bed. I was tired. We'd had a big day, and he was still staying up. He was a night owl. And about 1:30 in the morning, I got up because he still hadn't come to bed. And as I got up and walked into the living room, the whole house was filled in this brilliant yellow orange light, which is that Sai Baba energy. And it was just glowing physically in my eyes. We didn't have cameras or stuff. We're taking any pictures. And I said to him, what have you been doing? And he said, I've been praying to Sai Baba for answers and for help. And it was just this magnificent energetic that just was sustainable. I mean, it was minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes of my awakening into that experience. And I wish we'd had a camera at the time. And I'm curious if others of you have had a similar thing. It isn't necessarily an orb, but the energetic is so strong that it fills the room and you can see it that visibly, demonstratable by whatever he was doing in his prayer work. Anybody?
Joyce?
Christine does.
I've had that many times in my life, and sometimes with people who I care about, especially related to prayer and urgent situations where someone might be ill and it didn't seem like their time to pass. And I remember a time when I was a kid and my aunt was misdiagnosed with a mental illness, and she had multiple sclerosis, which wasn't defined really clearly at the time. I was probably 12 years old, 10, 12 years old, and my parents had to get permission for me to go into the room. And literally, when I went into the room, this gigantic light appeared in back of her. And I asked my parents later on if they saw it. And all they could say is they felt a lightness in the room that they hadn't felt beforehand. Other times that they would go to visit her. But that's just one example. But there were many other examples of, and particularly praying, or even like at 9/11, when 9/11 occurred, a very similar thing happened where lights were appearing as I was driving, and my parents were driving in back of me. They saw lights, as we had no idea 9/11 was going to happen. And I was driving from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I have scoliosis, so I can't drive for long, but I kept hearing the message from the divine, keep driving, do not stop, keep driving. And I told my parents this, and at the time they trusted when I would get these strong sensations. They too drove. We drove through the night. We arrived the night before, the evening before the morning of 9/11. And if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have arrived. And the lights were just kind of guiding us like, this is important. Keep going, keep going.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted, I know you know this because you're all experienced, but just the various ways that, spirit shapes energy for us to get our attention, to comfort us, and, being aware of it intuitively as well as, structurally, it just hand in hand important.
Christine had her hand up earlier. Dan, she's got it. Did you still want to say something, Christine?
Yeah.
Before Dan.
When I was getting my Reiki Masters, the final, I guess, alignment or whatever, I felt the Amida Buddha above me and just golden orange light just pouring over me. And it was profound.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah.
Thanks. Pamela has her hand up. Sorry, I didn't see your hand there for a moment.
Yeah, this is bringing up many, many issues today. And thank you very much, Dan. I was very confounded. A couple of weeks ago, I had said that to you regarding the orbs.
Mm-hmm.
So many orbs and different people taking these pictures with different cameras. And I was kind of skeptical as to what I was viewing. But it's very, very difficult to have a discussion with people who are convinced at what they're seeing. So again, being very careful. The other thing, just recently now, I forget who just brought this up. You did with the lights. I just had a very recent experience with a friend of mine. I was in the hospital for several days. And I had one light. I didn't like lights in the room. And I had one particular light that I wanted on at all times. And that light was on all the time. And a friend of mine who very recently lost her father came to visit me. And as we were discussing him, that light started to flash, 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 flash. And I said, and I knew that was her father. And I said, your father here is to visit with us. She is not completely awakened. So she was like, yeah, that would be nice. The thing is, her father was an electrician by trade. So that was a very recent experience that I had that goes with our discussion. The other is, I had a very close friend who was a medium, and we were at a evening of meditation, and afterwards, you could tell that she was seeing, not imagining, because we did not see it. You could watch her eyes, and she said, there's an orb in here. And she followed that orb from 2 different rooms. She was moving around with it, and you could see her eyes, and that she was actually seeing this. So yes, I do believe that we can see these things. Also, this very same person, in relation to your last pictures, when you said you could not really define what that was, she claimed that she could see light beings. Those lights that you were seeing without, you said during the day, they were in the very end of your presentation. She claimed she saw light beings, and she showed me once. She did take a picture of one, but she would describe them. And this particular one had a form that was very much human in nature, in its appearance, but with very sharp extensions coming from it. So this has been a very stimulating presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. That description you just said with the light beams coming off reminds me of this strange entity that was photographed at that Spiritist Center in Brazil that I showed in my slideshow. I'd never seen anything like that before. And as far as I'm concerned, that was a legitimate, as far as I can tell, a legitimate those are legitimate photographs of an objective, glowing, floating entity. As far as individuals seeing orbs moving around them, I can believe that one person in the room can see them and maybe others can't. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an objective orb moving through the room, but that the person is perceiving it as such. We don't know. We don't know. Only the person perceiving it can even make a guess at it.
Mhm.
You know, and to the extent to which the orb obeys the spatial limitations of the room, I suppose you can theorize that it's an objective quasi-physical entity that other people can't see, or it may be projected into the consciousness of the one person who can see it. Again, we don't have the tools really to determine that, and you know, in a sense, it doesn't matter that much. And as Gene has emphasized, the main thing is that to the extent that we acknowledge the reality of these things, we can allow ourselves to feel the significance of it. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to analyze it and dissect it and say, well, it has this mechanical or mechanistic aspect and this spiritual aspect. Question is, why is it happening? The first question, is it happening at all? And if it is, then the next question is, why is it happening? Is that significant for everyone who observes it? Is it significant to the one person who may experience it? I think we're just in kindergarten in terms of learning to understand these things. Lloyd.
That's a good point.
Yeah, a good friend of mine was a materialist and lost that at his mother's deathbed when he saw a kind of a wisp coming up and floating to the corner of the room. And they had their 2 German shepherds in the room, and the German shepherds were following that with their eyes and barking.
It's another thing that dogs. Yep.
Yeah. So
great. Well, I would have loved to have been there to watch their faces or your friend's face as he observed this. Yeah. And we had been, you and I have had a little bit of correspondence about, where we're each coming from. And I know that you have come out of a very strongly intellectual tradition, and that you have, you're in the process of kind of expanding out of that. Is that fair to say?
Almost. I was raised in a spiritualist family that believes in reincarnation. But I was raised I came of age in the San Francisco Bay Area and was very influenced by some of the Marxist materialist influences, even though I never became a Marxist. So I started to subscribe to the super psi explanations in my teens. And I just kept ignoring the question because I was afraid that I might be right. And when finally we had a baby when I was 50 years old. And I decided I had to start studying this stuff from both sides, the skeptic and the other, and came to the conclusion, of course, that this is real. But yeah, I very much go by the science of it. And I do call myself a skeptic in the positive sense of the word.
No. Yeah, I think that's important, and also to remain personally sensitive and tuned in to the extent that we can to the, for example, in what you described about this individual passing, is a very common experience called a shared death experience, where those around a person who's departing either can see them literally leaving their bodies, or have a personal experience of accompanying them partway to the other side. And I think if people were just less concerned about expressing these things and sharing them, we'd find that they're a whole lot more normal than we think.
Absolutely.
I think that's one area of sociological research that really begs to be done.
Now, what exact study are you thinking of? Like, what would be the question, the specific question you'd be studying?
Well, I haven't thought it through in detail, but generally speaking, have you ever had an experience that was, far enough out of the mainstream experience that you've been reluctant to share it? And when I was much younger, I was very focused on the UFO question. I grew up in the 1940s, where it was before the curtain of ridicule came down, which was in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It was a perfectly normal subject of discussion, and people would talk about it on the radio and so on. And so I became fascinated with it. And I would ask people as I grew up and was in contact with different subcultures, I would ask, have you ever had such and such an experience? And very often the answer would be, oh, no, nothing like that. No. Oh, but wait a minute. That happened when I was 14 years old. I've never told anyone about it. And then this story would come tumbling out. So
well, then,
go ahead.
Well, I was at a railroad station waiting for a train one time, started talking to somebody. It turned out he was an elder caregiver too. And he said something that was very materialistic, that obviously he believed in the materialistic paradigm. I decided to share what I believed. And all of a sudden his bearing changed and he said, oh yeah, actually.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he started sharing his whole background of paranormal experiences.
Right. Rupert Sheldrake talks about what scientists and academics talk about in the pubs after hours that they won't discuss in the milieu of their own institutions.
Right.
I think I think you could actually do a very almost a funny documentary on this subject, or a funny book of interviews.
Yeah, I would love it. Yeah.
Yeah. I at one time I think I'd mentioned that I had run into a couple of nurses who had worked in a pediatric oncology unit. And they had all kinds of stories of experiences that they had had and that the children had had. And I was at that time considering interviewing them, doing a documentary. And the working title was "Don't Tell the Doctor." And so there, I still have in the back of my, if I live long enough and I have some of my other projects in progress finished, I might do that. But I think that in a way that the sociological aspect is one of the most important.
Yeah.
How our culture frames its reality and what it's willing to willing to admit to and discuss openly.
Now you must have heard of Taste. I forget his name.
Charles Tart.
Charles Tart. Yeah.
Yeah.
He has a whole study of scientists who don't want to admit it publicly, but he has cataloged all these experiences that scientists say they've had, but mostly won't admit to in public. Right.
Yeah. Charlie just passed away recently, actually.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. He lived in North Berkeley.
Yeah.
He was just a wonderful character, and he also bridged the scientific and the engineering and the metaphysical spectrum.
Yeah,
and was a wonderful pioneering researcher.
He was one of the first people who started bringing me back into the fold 20 years ago, 23 years ago.
Yeah, he was definitely one of the seminal figures.
Yeah.
Regina, you had your hand up?
I do have my hand up because I would like to know from Wendy if she has had experience with orbs in all the seance rooms that you've been in.
Well, I wish I could get a copy of the video. Karen Jarvie was sitting in a dark room seance, and there was just a little bit of light, and the music was on, and there's this orb that's circling her and goes right up to her, which we considered was Emma. It's just the most amazing picture of orbs, and I'm pretty sure that I can get a copy of it, but it's just that was the most amazing one that I've ever seen.
Wendy, could you see that with your eyes or only with the video?
Only with the video. I wasn't actually there,
okay.
But I've just seen the video. No, I'm pretty sure that everybody who was there could see it as well. I'll double check on that one.
Would you, and it was Emma. There wasn't even a question about that.
There was no question.
Right. And Karen would really like to participate in this conversation.
Well, Karen was very much into
she's here.
Orbs.
She's here, if I may share a little bit of what she's been telling me.
Right.
And she is saying to me that Global Gathering and beyond, most people want to classify orbs as orbs or this or that. She said there's so many layers to the orb factor. And whether they're doing it with, you classify crop circles and you classify orbs, but how many people have actually put them together like the conversation was here? She's also saying that we have to experience the orbs for what it means to us personally, not to what it means to anybody else. It is a personal gift that you receive, even if it is a light refraction on the lens of your cameras. If you receive it as a personal excitement, as a personal gift, as a personal connectiveness to that which is greater than the reality you exist in, then it's a gift. It doesn't matter the justification of being scientific or not. And she apologizes to you, Dan. It doesn't mean that she's negating that, but she says that if we use it for our own monetary benefits to create, what was that, clientele, then that's wrong, of course. But you can't morally you can't tell that person not to do that, because that person is not very spiritual. They're utilizing it, using it as opposed to being a true spiritual gift to the people with you or their readers. Sorry, this is all over the place. She's grabbing, it feels like she's up here grabbing balloons. Orb here, orb here, orb here, orb here, camera orb, car orb. But she's saying the important thing is the gift that they bring to you and each and every one of us. If you have experienced an orb and it has brought you joy and light and love, or if it's your intuitive spiritual nature who's come in to clear something that needs to be cleared from the place, then that's okay too. You have to really ask yourself and be honest with yourself with your answers, as well as listening to your intuitive. And that's what she's saying, because she said, if she hadn't listened to her intuitive, do you realize how much communication she would have lost with Emma? And she said, if I hadn't heard how often Emma was with me or been there, she said, but I not only could see the orbs, but I felt the orbs long before I could see them. But it was long after she began to recognize the orbs or Emma's orb, Emma's signature. Somebody else may have a different signature. And another person reading that orb may not even identify the signature and just say, well, it's just a flash flare or a camera lens refraction. And it very well could be. But to the person who is reading the orb, the individual who experiences some form of a lifting of the veil between that and the greater reality, what a gift. Just a gift. That's all she wants to say.
Thank you so much, Regina, and
that was Karen.
And thank you so much, Karen. and just to for our more recent guests here, Emma was Karen's daughter.
Yes.
Right. And thank you for that. And I would ask Karen, from the point of view of my own motivation for trying to bring the scientific and the spiritual together. My motive has been to kind of soften the boundary and to make a more expanded consciousness hopefully available to people who are also critical thinkers and acute observers. And so I think there's value in that, even in terms of opening up the perceptions of people who are, who may be very have a good, well-talented left brain.
Dan?
Yes.
She says there's one word you must use at all times, no matter what you're looking at. Discernment.
Yes.
Always use discernment.
Right.
Not negating the value of the scientific approach at all, but discernment. And
Exactly.
whether you're choosing a medium or choosing a friend or choosing to believe, do it with discernment.
Thank you.
Says your
Agreed.
heart will always tell you the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I'm sorry for interrupting, Dan.
No,
They're louder than you.
Anyone else hanging out and with anything to offer from the other side?
Jeannie has something to say.
Yes. Jean, hi. Yes. Go ahead.
I don't know if you've seen this, and I don't know how real this is, but it came across in the last 24 hours on my feed. And supposedly there has been this research group in Russia working for the last 10 years to understand the brain and the electricity of the brain and where the essence of our spirit goes after the body dies. And supposedly in this research, and I'm paraphrasing here, so I may not get it right, they were going in with volunteers and putting in, I want to say isotopes, but that's probably not the correct term, but they are putting in codes in the electrical system of these volunteers. It's much more sophisticated than I'm relaying to you right now. So they could track when the person passed, where they went. And when the first person passed, the information came in so quickly, the computers could not keep up with it. And when they finally caught up with the information within an hour of the person's demise, they found that the markers went to a planetary system that's at the farthest 18 billion light years away that we can register with. And there was no explanation for why it was built there. Do we all go there? Whatever. And the young person that was reporting this was saying he couldn't believe that this wasn't front page news. So, true or not, it seemed very authentic, but you never know. I would love to find out more about that for those people of you that are inclined to do research. But it doesn't surprise me the Russians weren't there first, because they were there first with all the psychic phenomena and everything, because they separate the emotionality of it all and just look at it strictly as research. But that's why this young person, they all look like they're under 20 to me anymore, could not believe that this wasn't first place, first front page news in terms of consciousness. So I'll just leave that out to you and see where that might lead us. I don't know if I think I put it on my feed. I'm not sure, so I could find it again. But
if you can send me the link, I'd love to follow that up.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. Anyway, that's just something else for our researching mind and where we want to go. So, and thanks to Karen, I'm sure she was the one doing the lights last night. When I think about it, so thank you.
Well, anyone else? Well, it looks like we've run out.
I think we're good, Dan. Unless you can share the photo that I sent you through your message. That would be the only way that one would be shared. And those are the ones.
Yeah, I've got
done
it.
That was done on film.
Right. Hang on 1 second. I'll share it. There it is. And you said that was shot on film some years ago.
In the 60s, early 60s. Yeah. It had to be in the early 60s by his age.
So very, very unlikely that would be a purely photographic effect.
Well, she'd seen it all with her eyes before she ran in and got the camera. He said they were with him all the time when he was out building.
Now, I don't remember what you told me about him. He
was the neighbor on the hill where the orbs used to come from.
Wasn't he autistic or something?
No, he was just oddly brilliant that people didn't understand him. He was not autistic. He was just brilliant and kind of a loner, and he was just build everything. And he said that he built everything because of these spirits, these beings that taught him how to build, and was mathematically highly inclined.
Wow.
So.
All right. Yes. Thanks.
May I say that he might have been autistic?
Oh, sure.
Because if you listen to the telepathy tapes, they're pretty amazing.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, I would imagine there was, because he was pretty, I was pretty young. So, and he was a year younger or a year older than me. I'm not sure, but I didn't blend well with him. He was very much, he hung with my sister a lot, but yeah, he was he was what a lot of people would have called an odd duck. So yeah, I would think so. Yeah. But I didn't know him past a certain age, so. Anyway, I just thought that was a fascinating photo that was from his mom that had given to a researcher who was studying the lights that come over that area. And he had interviewed other people in the area that had seen the lights.
Wow.
But that was the only photograph.
Lloyd, did you want to add
Lloyd?
something? Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, Gene, where did you say there's a reference to the article about that Soviet experiment, was it, that you talked about?
Yeah, it was on my feed, and I don't remember. If I don't write it down, it's kind of in and out. But I think if you typed in Russian experiment with life after death, you might, who knows what'll pop up if we just give that. But they tracked it down to a particular planet. They named it because the scientists had a name for the planet. I guess it had been mapped where supposedly his consciousness went. And I didn't remember the details at this age. I do not remember details unless I write them down. I read it for the moment, and it's like, wow, and then off it goes. So I apologize that I don't have better information for you, but
no, that's fine. Yeah, I might look it up. Thanks.
That'd be great.
Okay, I think it's time to wrap it up.
It's time, Dan. That's been absolutely fabulous.